Hello, this is Druidsfire, and I'm here with another video inspired by PAX East 2024. Well, not so much inspired by as discussing a game that I got to play at PAX. Now, this one's a little bit unusual. It's very different from all the other games that I played, not only in subject matter, but also in the game itself and the structure. The fact that I don't have like a ton of screenshots to show, don't have a demo to show, it's not on Steam. But it's a different kind of game, and they had a playable demo available on the show floor. So I'm going to have to describe what it is, but we're also going to go check out the website, romancingjan.com, and we're going to talk about why this game is so different from other video games. It's pretty much a visual novel. So basically, you're playing through the game, there's no real combat, you're just talking to people, and what you say to people, how you react to things, changes the story. Now, one thing I'd like to point out about this game is, as the website calls it, it is a diverse and inclusive alternative history, Regency inspired experience. Now, basically, Bridgerton is a hot trend right now. People in the Regency era, which is like early 1800s, the Jane Austen sort of era, and living through that time frame. So the Regency era is basically a time of change in Europe in real life history. There were things coming up whereas, the French decided to behead their king and queen, the infamous Marie Antoinette, who said let them eat cake. And the world then, unfortunately, also somewhat as very much as now, was a place where, how to phrase this appropriately, it was very unfair, and there were rules against being who you are. There were rules against you just based on what gender you were born as, what gender you present as, if they're different from one another, if, the color of your skin, who your parents were, what education you had. Sounds somewhat familiar, but it's very different. So this particular game has a couple of other things going for it. And partly it's based on who the team is, who's making the game, but also the fact that they're not just making a game. They also have, if you see up here in the top, it mentions a live event. They're doing an in-person event later this year in 2024 in Massachusetts, where basically you're going to have like an experience. Kind of like the notion of Star Wars, like the Star Wars Star Cruiser at Disneyland, only a lot better. And not costing $5 billion. So this is definitely something you want to check out, but I want to focus on the actual digital game side of things. And so what the game starts off as is you create a character. The character creation was in the demo very limited because the game itself isn't due out in the near future, probably next year sometime. And you're playing a character this is their debut into society. This is something that young aristocrats would do. Is you are being presented to society so they learn who you are, and there's the whole who is this person going to marry, scandals, gossip, all kinds of fun stuff. Now, where this game is very much different is the fact that they wrote their own alternative history. And I thought, well, maybe they just go back 20, 50 years and change it. No. They went back to like the 1200s. We're going to look at, this is the night in Endicott. So this is basically where you're going to dress up and a decadent afternoon and evening of celebration, recreation, community, and romance. Because, of course, that's all about the Jane Austen, like who's marrying who and why are they marrying it, and marrying for love and all kinds of wackiness like that. So basically, this is an alternate history. It's kind of like England as it could have been if things had happened differently all over the world. For example, as they're saying in here, high society treats all people of any gender, sexuality, race, or ethnicity as equals. Very much unlike even today. And so another thing they did is they completely got rid of the whole colonial era. So yes, there were explorers, but things like Christopher Columbus, well, he kind of didn't get where he was going. So the smallpox epidemic did not happen in what is called the Westlands. So the indigenous people in many places were left to be themselves and not colonized or forcibly. There is some of that in the history that they made for this reality. But also I want to point out their team is very diverse. They also have a code of conduct for their playing, and that includes both in-game and in their overall community. And this basically says, this is how we expect you to act. Please act this way or you can exit stage left, as it were. And in general, one thing that was a little bit is like, okay, you can actually send real life paper letters to whoever you're hanging out with in the game or whatever. And I thought that was very fascinating because one of the things that they do is you send the letter to like their office, their PO box or whatever, and then the staff will read it. So don't write anything like bad or private or properly private. Like this is all role playing within the game, and then they will rebundle it and send it to the address of the other player, which I thought was really fascinating, and how they're trying to protect people's privacy. It's all in the code of conduct. But what I'd like to do is explore the world in this game. Now, one thing you may see about the game based on the image taken off their website. Let's actually bring that to front. And we're going to make this a little bit bigger. So we're going to show you what this is supposed to kind of look like. So you can see like a black lady. I believe this person is of Asian descent. This lady is obviously from the subcontinent of India. Probably an Irish lady with the red hair. Standard American, or not American. I shouldn't say American because American doesn't exist in this reality. Like the United States doesn't exist in this whole thing. Black gentleman. So 2 ladies, 2 dudes, and the gender fluidity is a thing, and it's basically treated as not unusual, not something that's going to be causing scandal. People aren't getting executed for it like it happened in reality. Holy crap. But in general, you, the player, should be able to find some facet of your reality to roleplay as yourself within the game. Pardon me. So let's explore the world. I do like the website where you get to play with these little things here. So they have an encyclopedia and talking about their team of writers and consultants. One thing this game has is consultants. Not random ivory tower scholars who may have never even been to the country they're talking about or the culture they're talking about, but actual folks from that culture who can speak knowledgeably about that culture. We're not just talking like one cultural consultant who does everything. They got multiple cultural consultants from across their team, and I thought that was really amazing. And so this is their writing credits, and while the images are not of the real people, they kind of give you an idea which culture they're from. So they're writing from a place of knowledge. They're writing from a place of respect. They're writing from a place of sensitivity to the cultural imperatives, what's taboo, what's not taboo, what they should not be talking about, or whatever. So basically, as they say, it's not a historical game. So one thing I found when I was they have a whole freaking timeline. We're gonna go take a look at that. So this is an alternate reality where history took a left turn at Albuquerque a very long time ago, like in the 1200s. And so this is like 600 years worth of alternative history where instead of like, Group A meeting Group B, and then, them fighting, they teamed up. Or, instead of something where they immediately start trying to colonize or enslave people, instead they try to actually reach out and make connections instead. And they explain why. They say, and I quote, "We have made these changes purposefully so that players of all cultures and lifestyles can enjoy the experience of immersive gameplay in this romantic era made popular by writers like Jane Austen, but without the feeling that they could not have truly belonged in such a society." Which, guess what? That happens a lot in video games, where you don't feel like you're not playing yourself, or you're not representing who you are or your people. You always have to play somebody else. Or if there's something vaguely close to your culture, it's almost a mockery of it. Or it's definitely stereotyped. And a lot of UDMs are like this, unfortunately, and this is different. And so they said, and I continue the quote, "We have altered history so that our non-cis, non-white, non-heterosexual players can feel comfortable creating and telling their own story in this era." So it takes away a lot of the conflict, but not all of it. There's still war. Napoleon's still rampaging around Europe, doing his thing. There's still societal, class-related conflict. There's still scandals about who is romancing who and whatnot. And also, if you have a kid out of wedlock, oh my god. Especially if you don't support that kid. So there's still things to have conflicts about, but it takes away a lot of the things that people had conflicts in the 1800s. So I found that really fascinating. So let's check out their timeline briefly. And this is, as I said, they started in the 1200s. So they start here, and they go forward, and it basically tells you what started happening where. So there's going to be some names that are going to be familiar, like Marco Polo, the Silk Road, and some countries are the same. But I personally, when I was reading through this, I think I need a map. Honestly, I think I need a map, because I'm not familiar with a lot of the names, and this is due to my personal education, even though I was a history major back 30 years ago. But my knowledge was only undergraduate, and was well before a lot of the revolution in education of late, where people actually gave a shit about what people called, like, back when I was in college, it was still called Mount McKinley, not Denali, for example. So the naming of things and knowing what the actual name of the places as named by the indigenous people rather than the invading colonizers, I'm deficient in that, and I acknowledge that. So basically, they start in the 1200s and they go forward from there. And so they talk about islands that are named things, and I need to look up what Donawan means. I don't know where this is. But we're talking about indigenous people and Austronesian people, so I'm wondering if this is somewhere in Polynesia, or is it Australia, what we call Australia, for example. And so, yeah, I get lost immediately. I don't know where half these places are. Some of them you can kind of tell which cultures they came from just based on the name, like Majapahit. That tells me this is somebody from the, from basically what modern people would call, people in real life would call India, for example. The Kingdom of Tondo, I'm not entirely sure. The Ming Dynasty we know of. And some of the same events still happen, such as, the Edo period happens. But like, for example, North America is completely different. It's called the Westlands. And so basically there's Nordic traders that we call Vikings. That whole Newfoundland thing, yeah, that happened. And that kept happening. So, for example, the people that we would call Native Americans never colonized, never slaughtered, never made treaties with the East, with the Europeans, who then immediately ignored them. So they basically did their whole ass thing on their own, and created languages and ran them all over the country, and then eventually they got horses and then rode them all over. So there's this whole thing. And this goes on for hundreds of years, from the 1200s to the 1500s, 1600s. So there's going to still be some of the names that we know about, like Elizabeth I, Henry VIII. What Henry VIII did, actually 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue and never got where he was going. Never got home either. I would say I'm crying, but I'm not. Because quite frankly, that guy was a dick. Anyhow, continuing on. So some historical events happening, like there's the Battle of Manila. There's a big thing. And continuing on, here's King Henry VIII. I love this entry. King Henry VIII of England, upon hearing of Martin Luther's dispensation of a second wife to Landgrave Philip of Hesse, declares the practice of polygamy legal in England, accepted and recognized by the Church of England, and this allows him to legitimize his heirs and marriages. So, King Henry VIII did not behead any of his wives. So that's kind of cool. So you can start thinking about how this would actually change reality. So this is basically where they are in terms of, going through the 1500s. Again, the 1500s, in the 1600s, no colonialization of the Americas. There was some connection. Slavery is outlawed by the Mali Empire in the Kingdom of Benin, with the Kingdom of Dahomey following 2 years later. So they still had indentured slavery, and eventually that went away. So yeah, again, through North America, the indigenous folks did their own thing, minding their own beeswax. And then eventually they get to the 1800s, which is where we are now. So there's no George Washington, there's no Revolutionary War in America, none of that happened. We have basically what happened is because Christopher Columbus died on his journey, and things didn't happen the way they were the way they did happen. Nobody decided to colonize North America, which I really like that alternate history, honestly. Sure, that means that wouldn't exist, but who cares? All right, now moving on, we're gonna go all the way back to. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning. We'll just go to the top of the page. Boom. And we're going to go back to the world. And this time we want to examine the cultures a little bit. And this is going to describe who everybody is. And this one I haven't really looked at a lot. So you have the Asian continent, the African continent, North American continent, European, South America, and Australian. Okay. So this actually describes this. See, if I'd read these, I'd probably have more ideas as to what's going on. And this pretty much tells you what's going on with the current cultures in those areas. Okay, so down to one is the Philippines. All right, that would have helped. All right, and so basically this describes who is where, even more than the timeline does. So you can then check out the African continent to see who's out there. But yeah, in general, I mean, some of them have a little bit more information that than we have, than others have. So the North American continent is pretty much, the Tsalagi nation, and you have Vietnam. And there's some mentions of like who some cultures are. It's like, okay, these people, are who we know as the Serrano people, and that kind of explains who they are. Sometimes there's some links to, real life peoples or names just to kind of give you an idea where things are, or who people are. So right now, it's talking about what wars are going on at this point in time. The War of 1812 is not happening because Canada doesn't exist, nor does the United States. So good times. All right. So this is Romancing Jan. And again, I would like to point out the team they have in place. One thing I would like to note is how many people on this team used to work at Turbine. Athena Peters used to be Vivian, the executive producer of Lotro at one point. And I'm not familiar with most of the other folks, but as you can see, we've got, cultural consultants, we got contributing writers, we've got copy editor, we got all kinds of fun. A military consultant, definitely good because there were a lot of wars going on then. And so this team is very diverse. So the game itself is going to let you explore things such as sexuality, marriages, in terms of what are they there for? Are they for love? Well, that's a bit of a scandal. Are they there for some kind of alliance purposes, some business trade purposes, like marry this rich person and my company will join your company, etc., etc. Women can hold equal rank in society as men, and pretty much, while people might call into question whom you're dating because you might be dating somebody who's not in your class, they're not going to give you crap because you're dating somebody who is, say, a homosexual because, hey, guess what, so are you. Or that you're pale skin like me and you're dating somebody who's black, or anything. The identity politics that we have in real life doesn't exist in this game, which I really, really like. The only politics we see is actual government politics. This government, that government, and high society, middle society, lower society. And so it takes a lot of stress off things and lets a player really get into, okay, I want to play in this kind of era, but I want to play in a kind of this era that I'm not going to, that I feel like I can fit into. And I thought that was really cool. So when I was actually playing the game, my character was being introduced, and I was given two couples to talk to. Not couples like romantic couples, two sets of two people. Like a brother and sister each, I believe. And one of them that I thought was, it was like one who was like an established gossiper, right? And the other one was, I guess, not so much an up-and-coming, but just somebody who wasn't of upper crust, right? But they were still important enough to have been invited, and the male half of this is like brother and sister. Like, the brother was deaf and used sign language, and his sister was his interpreter. About the only criticism I would have, and I had mentioned this to their social media person, Johnny Liu, who also an ex-Turbinite and an acquaintance, that it'd been really cool, and this might still be on their books, is if the sign language had actually been acted out with real sign language. And by real, I would actually imagine not American Sign Language, but rather British Sign Language, because America doesn't exist, like the United States doesn't exist. But having the actual graphics of the game portray the sign language correctly, that would be something that that would probably add a level of accessibility that most other games wouldn't even bother to do. I mean, from my understanding, having talked to the folks at PAX East, they were really interested in the possibility of doing something like that, but they also, they obviously recognize the fact that something like that would take a lot of work to animate. And could they do it? And that's really a big question, whether they can do it, whether they have it in the works and ready to go with their proposed launch date, whenever it is. Not a clue. But I tossed that idea out there. I'm sure they have tons of ideas. I'm sure it's something they already thought of, like 5 years ago. And you can find out more about this game at romancingjan.com. It is being made by Rainbow Unicorn Games, and you can find them at rainbowunicorngames.com. I would also like to point out one thing that they are doing differently is as a company. Now, and this is normally something I don't talk about in these videos about a company doing something interesting. But the company themselves is trying to be aggressively diverse. Not aggressively as punching somebody's lights out, but their point is to make games for folks who are frequently marginalized by other games. Like everybody, diversity and inclusion is not a cuss word to them. In fact, it's quite the opposite. So they consider that when they do anything. So their core values on here are diversity, inclusion, fairness and respect, and collaboration. And what they're trying to do is they want to make video games that are for diverse players. And here's something interesting. I didn't even know what this is. It's a public benefit corporation, which they're registered as a public benefit corporation, and they say on their website, which means that our mission is more than aspirational. Our structure enables us to base success metrics around a triple bottom line: people, prosperity, and the planet. So basically, unlike the disaster, the garbage dumpster fire that is the rest of the video game industry that we see on the news, they're trying to do something different, and they're trying to be funded in a different way, and being responsible to their team and to their players. They are available on all the social media types, so check them out. And they have these really cute, their staffers are called unicorns, and their avatars on rainbowunicorngames.com they're so adorable. So I would say check this game out if this is a game that appeals to somebody who might have been ignored by other games, who you don't feel like you belong. This sounds like a game where you can find your place, your people, your tribe. Though I don't know if using tribe is inappropriate or not, so I should check on that. Alright, so thanks for watching this video. If you like these sorts of videos, drop a subscribe on my channel. I don't get anything for it, but the number goes up in a good way, and it doesn't involve people's money, so it's all good. Anyhow, thanks for watching, and if you do the subscribe, you will get more videos like this in your feed, including my long-form gameplay, and I'll keep an eye out for this one for when the game actually is available to demo on Steam. They are going to be doing a Kickstarter for it at some point later this year, I believe, and yeah. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.